Hello and welcome to the Executive Pill, the podcast where brilliant leaders from every corner of the world share their secrets to help you lead smarter, influence better, and succeed faster. Think of it as your cheat code to navigating leadership with clarity and confidence. I'm your host, Alex D. Tremble, CEO of GPS Leadership Solutions. And over the past decade, I've had the privilege of working with executives from Fortune 500s, from government agencies, and high growth organizations navigate leadership, influence, and culture. This podcast is your shortcut to learning what works from the best of the best. And I promise you this, you're not about to hear theory. It's proven strategy that you can use today. And before we jump in, please do us a tiny favor. Click that like button, click the subscribe. It's always really interesting to see on the back end how many people are watching and listening, but how many few of you are actually subscribing. So please, please, please do us a favor. Click the like, click the subscribe. Those things actually power this information, these stories to reach more and more people. Now, let's make today extraordinary together. Today we have the amazing Mr. Herman Bulls. Herman serves as the vice chairman for Americas, as well as the international director and the founder of JLL's highly acclaimed Public Institution Division, which specializes in delivering comprehensive real estate solutions to federal, state, and local government, nonprofit organizations, and higher education institutions. Herman's works with the firm's largest public and corporate clients to devise and implement integrated real estate solutions and strategies to lower occupancy costs and increase productivity. This man is a not only a leader within his organization, but within his community, within his industry. And he is someone definitely we are blessed to have with us today. How are you doing today, kind sir?
I'm doing well, Alex. Thank you for that very, very kind introduction.
Hey, if for anyone who's watching versus listening, this man has the best office I have ever seen, and I one day plan to have an office as beautiful as this one. I I wanted to start us off with again a very softball question. What do we need to know about your past to help us understand who you are and how you see the world?
Well, Alex, first of all, I want to thank you for having me on the program. I want to thank you for your leadership. It's phenomenal. And as you were telling me, at a very young age, after being a government employee at the Park Service, you saw this thing called leadership, and you're local to the DMV and the entrepreneurship. And I hope we'll talk about a little of that during this day. And you're exhibiting all of those qualities. And in the end, we're going to talk a lot about leadership. And obviously, that's the name of your company. And leadership is so important. So to answer your question, who am I? I think it really starts with telling you a little about background and my family. It all started down in Alabama. I am the youngest of 7 kids. My mother is a saint. Unfortunately, I never met my father. He was killed in an accident when my mother was 6 months pregnant with me. We come from in Alabama, somewhat of an agrarian community. My father was a farmer. He owned some land. However, his day job was working as a janitor at TVA, the Tennessee Valley Authority. And doing that work, he worked kind of the evening shift, and then he would come home and work on the farm. And one day, actually in October 1956, he was going from the portion of the farm where our family home is located over to another section of the farm, and he was driving his tractor. And unfortunately, when he got onto a 4-lane highway, the partials were only a mile apart. However, to get there, you had to go on this 4-lane highway. But unfortunately, an 18-wheeler truck ran into his tractor. He was killed. As I understand it, during this time, my mother was in another part of the county picking cotton. Everybody has to work to make it, everything work. And, she got this horrible news, and we'll talk later about my wife. Unfortunately, I lost her 4 years ago. And I think about what my mother must have been going through. But my mother, she's pregnant. She has 6 kids, and she loses her husband, our father. and it's not like she had a endowment to go to. And my mom, I think I attribute a lot of what I've done in terms of perseverance really to her, because in our community, particularly the Black community, it's all about the village and the family, everybody coming together. And they say, "Hey, Lucibel, I'll take one. I'll take one." That was my mother's name. And she said, "No, I'm keeping my family. I'm keeping it together." And Alex, what she did over the course of the next, really 15 years that I can imagine, obviously she had me, then she had 3 jobs for a long period of time.
Wow.
She was a cook. She was a domestic, meaning that she cleaned houses, white people's houses in the South.
Yeah.
And she also was a bill collector, or a collector for the Atlanta Life Insurance Company, which was the first African-American insurance company out of Atlanta. And I can remember as a young kid going with her, she would drive around and people would pay their premiums weekly. They'd pay a quarter, a dime, 50 cents. And it was very, very hands-on. And she would collect the money, mail it, and then mail it down to Atlanta. They gave her envelopes to mail it back. And she did this for a few years. And I can remember then when I was in about the 3rd grade, she went back and got her, because at this time she had not even finished high school. And she went back and got her GED. And I remember this fondly because sometimes we lived in the country, a place called Center Star, and where she had to go for her GED classes was in Florence, and that was about 18 miles away. And on some evenings, I would go with her, and while she was in class, the janitor would open up the gym, and I'd get to shoot basketball. I mean, it was fabulous. And long story short, she finished her GED. Now she's working the whole time. And then she went to the community college in Decatur, Alabama, about 40 miles away. And 3 days a week, she would drive round trip to take her classes. And after doing that for 2 years, now she's working full time as well, she became a licensed practical nurse. And when that happened, we moved from the farm in Center Star to Florence, Alabama. And I was in 7th grade by then. And I was very fortunate. It was the second 6 weeks period. And the basketball coach let me go for basketball. And I'll say now, just to show you the trend and what I saw, all 7 of the kids, and I'm the youngest, went to college. 6 of those 7 graduated. And we have a total of 11 degrees from those kids. So yeah, I can remember kids in high school. What are you going to do after high school? I mean, there was no question what I was going to.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't know anything else, but you go to college. Anyway, though, so the junior high, I was very fortunate to get under the wire and join the basketball team. I was a good student, and I often tell the story. However, I got C's in a course they called deportment. A deportment is obviously how do you carry yourself, et cetera, et cetera. Now, the reason I got the C's is because I talk too much. You're in class and you talk. And as I like to tell people, it has served me very well later. But in the junior high, went to Coffee High School. You got to remember now, we're in 1969, 70 now. And I had played peewee football. And I never forget, I told the coach, I said, I want to play quarterback. He looked at me. I was the only Black kid on the team. He said, "You're a guard. You go over there." And that had been probably 2-3 years earlier. And then when we got to junior high school, I went out for quarterback. And I was the starting quarterback for our freshman team. And this is a big deal in 1970.
Huge.
1969 in Alabama. And things go on. I had a terrific high school career. Let's start with the things that are important. National Honor Society. I was the first Black president of our student council. Our school, after desegregation, was 16% Black. Okay, so I had to have a coalition to get that done. I was the first full-time starting Black quarterback. I held the record in the high jump. And I also played baseball for 2 years and varsity basketball as well. So Boys State, I mean, it was, I was living the dream, so to speak. And I tell people often that senior year of high school on a, sophisticated, adjusted basis was probably one of the best years of my life. As student council president, I had a parking space reserved for me. And I gave the morning announcement every morning. And it was fantastic. So all of that could really cause you to get a big head. And then it came down to say, well, what am I going to do next? And I had the best opportunity I had from a football. Football was where it's at. You're in Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Mm-hmm.
like, right? And Vanderbilt put together something for me that was a partial scholarship, athletic, and they had just changed the rules where instead of you used to, if you signed a grant and aid, you signed a 4-year grant and aid, and the school had to pay no matter whether you played sports or not.
Yeah.
And that changed my senior year in high school. And I had a lot of small colleges. I had a lot of academic offers. However, all of the academies were also recruiting me. And I looked at everything, and people were telling me as a 17-year-old kid, you're going to be great. You're going to do all these things. Let me tell you, Alex, that's hard to take in this little community where, obviously minorities are in the minority, so to speak. And people are telling you how great you're going to be. And it was scary. It was actually scary. Now, I didn't show it because that's part of leader, right? You've got to have composure. However, I said, well, I'm going to take the toughest opportunity I have and really see if I can make it. And that was West Point.
Yeah.
And rather about West Point, when they were recruiting you for football, every week you would get a letter. And that letter many times would talk about, these are former people who played football at West Point, and these are the things they are doing now.
Yeah.
So having that long-term vision, and I had the opportunity to say, I'm going to take the road less taken and go to West Point and really get challenged and really see how good I am. So that's kind of the background of how I got to college and what I decided to do.
When you tell this story, a few concepts come to my mind. And the first two, I think, fairly obvious. One is your mother, when it talks about resilience. Just losing her husband, what is it, 4 or 6 months prior to birth, like that's got to be so hard. And she didn't give up. She went and got 3 jobs. She'd get her education. And it had to be hard. It had to be really hard. And if you translate that to today, I think that life can be really hard for people, especially all the geopolitical politics, everything that's happening in the country. And some people feel like it's never going to end. Why keep pushing forward? Why? What would you say to those individuals who want to do better, who want to do more, but they just feel like there's the headwinds are so strong, the waves are so strong that why even keep putting up a fight?
Well, that question I think up often, and even in the environment that I was raised in Alabama. Let me tell you some of the things real quickly about that. I recall driving down the street and seeing the KKK, Ku Klux Klan, people in their regalia, sitting there with a pail, taking donations, just like the firemen do now. Okay. They wouldn't bother you, but they would stop every car and take a donation. I recall going to the side door and having to go upstairs to go to the movie theater. Okay. I recall the signs on the water fountains when we would go into town that would say whites only. The bathrooms that would say whites only. I mean, this is in my lifetime. Yeah. I recall we didn't go out to eat very often, but going to a restaurant in Rogersville, Alabama. I'll never forget that place. And we would have to go around to the back and get our food because you couldn't go inside and sit down. Okay. So those are things that I talk about this, for example, to my kids, and they don't, I think they hear it, but the visceral understanding of it until you've experienced it. Okay. And all of those things were bad. But to answer your question, let's go back 3 or 4 generations for you and my forefathers when they actually were enslaved. Okay. And we shall overcome. And all the gospel songs that go now, what are they about? They're about perseverance. They're about hope. They're about humanity. They're about a better vision for the future. So I think if we think back to what our forefathers, and believe me, our race is not the only one that has been persecuted. Okay. You think about the Jews, and you think about, even you go to Ireland, and, you see the
Mhm.
racial conflicts that occur there. So it's occurred everywhere. However, if you think about, to answer your question, uh, you have to have hope.
Yeah.
Okay. You have to have perseverance. And you also have to apply the qualities that you've been given and have a vision for what the future can be. So that
Mhm.
hope is there. And if we even think back, Alex, I don't know if you probably weren't born then, but I was a little kid during the late 60s when all the riots was going
Yeah.
on, and protests for the Vietnam War. And if you think about what caused the riots, right, it was a combination of, think of a rat or an animal that you push into a corner,
Mhm.
push them into the corner, and they have no option but to do what? Attack.
Yeah.
And that is what occurs when people lose hope. So my
Mhm.
message in life is keep hope, understand that everything is not going to be hunky-dory every day, and you've got to work with those around you to make a better day.
You know, I as you share all of that, it reminds me of a stance that I have that's not very popular all the time. Which is, so what? Um, there are I I remember giving this talk. This university brought me in to talk to the students and whatnot, and some students brought up like, hey, should we not go to this organization, or looking at glass door, some of that glass ceiling, I mean, like, oh, they're not very inclusive, or they're not this, and this person doesn't like me, and this organization. And at the end of the day, I was like, yeah, so what? The reality is, like, it's not about living someone else's life, it's your life. And if things are hard, that's the reality. Things are hard. And to think about, for me anyway, to think about how hard something is a useless exercise. Do I want it? If it's worth it, then I'm going to make it happen, regardless of how unfair life may be. Because, like, again, using your example, your mom, it was probably really hard raising all those kids and having three jobs. But what's the alternative? To give up? Like, for me, like, that's not even a choice. And so we should just focus on what is it that we want, and then make it happen, and understand that hard is a part of it. Yeah.
Well, you know what, as you were talking about that, after I went to West Point, I played football for 2 years. My talent ran out, so to speak, and the coach called me in and said, "Hey, Herman, you're never going to play in the Army Navy game, and from West Point, the Army Navy game is what it's all about." And before the show started, I think I showed you a picture of me and Coach K, who
Mhm.
actually started his coaching career at West Point. And in high school, I tell you, I had a radio show, and they had actually also used that radio show to recruit me. And I did participate in WKDT 89.3 Serial FM, the Rock of the Hudson. So I was, and after I stopped playing football, I actually started doing play by play for both football and basketball.
Mhm.
And again, I met Coach K at the time. He was a young coach. His kids used to sit on my lap because he rides in jets now, but we would get on buses driving all around the Northeast to the basketball games. And he and I became very, very, good friends. And I'm actually on the Cole Center of Leadership and Ethics, Coach K Center of Leadership and Ethics at Duke. I'm one of the board members on that now. And two of my kids, we'll get to them in a little while, two of them went to the Fuqua School for their MBA as well. So it comes full circle. But the point I was making, after I played football, there's something in the Army called Ranger School. And any of
Mhm.
your listeners, look it up. So I had an opportunity, my tactical officer, they picked, kind of the best of the best, particular leadership and physical. And he said, "Bowles, you're going to Ranger School." And I said, "Okay." So I went to Ranger School. Ranger School is the Army's most intense and demanding training that you could get. And you're basically three phases at the time that I went through. There's the zero camp phase where it's all about conditioning. You're up at 3:30. You're crawling through mud. You're doing all making sure you got the navigation skills, hand-to-hand combat. Then there's the mountain phase where you start patrolling. All patrols are done at night. During the day, you're in a camp, but you've got to have security. This is replicating combat conditions, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, you get a little sleep, but somebody's got to be up. And then at night, it's about movement. And on the patrols, what is so important about that, you're not getting sleep. You get very little food.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're the leader of the patrol, okay, Alex, you're the leader, and I'm over here on the perimeter. And at a certain time, I'm supposed to start the machine gun fire. And I'm so tired, I go to sleep. Okay. Guess who fails to patrol? Me. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So it's about your ability. How is it that you motivate others to do what needs to be done? And the theory, the meaning of me telling this is that Ranger School, what I learned from that, and you talk to anybody else that has gone, you learn that your personal limits are farther than you think they are.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Because a lot of it is here, your hunger, okay, your fear. And what you want to do is you have to go here to your heart. Yeah. And every day that I think I'm having a bad day, I go back and say, you could be in Ranger School. Okay. and my oldest son actually had 3 combat tours. I never, despite my 30-year Army career, I never served in combat. And, it's tough. However, this training process is what stretched my tolerance and understanding that your limits are much further than you think they are.
Well, that's a really great point. I want to ask you then, for the vast majority of people who are listening and watching right now, they are not going to be able to go to Ranger School. And so how do you propose that they stretch themselves? Like what should they do to have that experience where they know this could be Ranger School? Like, how do you do that?
Well, it's mental. Okay. Think about this. And this is the way I've explained this answer in the past. If you're driving down the road and it's hot, it's 100 degrees, and you see this guy or gal, mostly a guy out there mowing the lawn, and he's got this big lawn in the hill, and you can tell that he's hot and stretching, and you're in the air-conditioned car. You say, oh my gosh, isn't that so bad? Well, you've been in a position where you've been out pulling the wood or mowing the lawn, and it's hot. When you're in the moment, you respond to what you have to. Okay. And I use that example. And you think about it, next time you see somebody and you say, oh my gosh, it's so hot out there. Then you think of the time that you've been out there doing it. Well, you've done that already on some scale. And from a human perspective, in terms of survival of the fittest, we have to do what we have to do when we have to do it. And one of the things that the military and Ranger School teaches you is discipline. Discipline, simply defined, is the ability to do what you know you ought to do.
Yeah.
Okay? Sometimes that alarm clock goes off and you want to touch it off and you want to roll over, but you say, I got a job to do. I got people depending on me. That's the discipline that gets you up to do it. This morning, I didn't do it because I got back from a board meeting last night very late. However, before I went to that board meeting the previous day, I got up before I went to the plane. And what did I do? I worked out.
Yeah.
I work out a minimum of 3 days a week. I like to get in 4 or 5 if possible. Every day before I get in the shower, what do? I go down and I drop for 50 because I like the fact that, yes, because it keeps my old man body not looking old man body. And invariably, I'm sweating when I finish.
Yeah.
Okay. And it hurts. That's discipline. Because I know on the other side of that, when I was on vacation last week with my family in Mexico, and my hot stud son sitting there on the beach, I don't look like I used to look, but I don't look bad. Okay. Whatever that motivation was for me is I don't want to go on vacation and say, oh my gosh, look at his belly. Hey dad, where's your chest? So, I mean, it sounds like a joke, but those are
Yeah.
some of the motivations that make us demonstrate discipline. So notice all those things. It comes back to somewhat ego, right? That we all have. And we say, what sacrifices are we willing to make so that those 2 hours total that they see me at the pool with no shirt on, where they're not going to kid me.
Yeah.
And that gives you motivation to go do it. And that motivation, you have to have discipline. So that's kind of a simple explanation I give.
Mike Tyson, I'm not going to get this correct 100%, but I love his, because I love yours, and it reminded me of his. He said discipline is doing the thing you hate like you love it. Like you don't want to do it, but you're going to put in the effort as if you love it because it's something you need to do.
Right.
Versus slacking off. I'm like, instead of 50 push-ups, how about I do 29 today? You're like, or do half push-ups. What is that? What is a hard truth you had to learn that made you a better executive leader? A hard truth you had to learn that made you a better executive leader.
Well, I'd love to go through some characteristics that I put in my speeches and I talk about. However, the hard truth that we all have to do to be a better leader is understand, in terms of the quadrants of the box, there's a box that you don't know that you don't know. Okay. So that means that you have to have some humbleness. That means you have to be open to knowing that if I was the best person in the world, perhaps there were other things that I would be doing. Well, why am I not the best person in the world? I'm not the best person in the world because there's a box up there about me. And we want to make that box as small as possible, that I don't know that I don't know.
Yeah.
You know that you know that you don't know, and you don't know that you don't know.
Yeah.
That's the box that I think everyone should analyze and say what they are. And this gives me an opportunity now to talk about, okay, to be a successful person, what are the characteristics? And I like to talk about 6 characteristics that are just critical. And I came to this after analyzing my career. And the first one I'm going to talk about before I get to the 6 is I want to talk about something that is so important for success. I give a speech, people come up and say, oh, Mr. Wills, I want to network with you. And networking is great, and we ought to network. However, networking at its base is very transactional. What am I going to do for Alex so that I can get something in return from Alex? Now, that is not wrong. You shouldn't be going and confessing a sin for doing that. That is okay. However, the transaction, you want to maybe think of it another way. Instead of networking, I think of the opportunity to connect. And let me define what I mean by connecting. Connecting is when you do something for or with someone without regard as to what you're going to receive in return. Let me say that again. Connecting is what you do for or with someone without regard as to what you're going to receive in return. When you do that and you connect, you form relationships. Okay? Now let's think of it as an acorn, and we're planting acorns. If we knew which acorn was going to survive, we would know which one to quote unquote connect with. But life is not simple. You don't know which acorn is going to survive. So to be a good connector, you have to be what? Consistent. And this one is even more important. You have to be authentic. People can see a phony.
Yeah.
When you connect phony, you're really networking because you're looking for a transaction. So the acorns come off. Think of it as your relationships. Some of them are going to bloom that spring. Some of them may not bloom until 20 years later. I just got off the phone with the CEO of a Fortune 500 company that I served on a board with, and someone at my firm wants to do business with that company. And this individual, we were on this board for 3 years together. We were on the American Red Cross Board of Governors together, and I kind of never asked him for anything, but we write each other notices and letters. He was just business person of the year in his city in the Midwest, and I wrote him a note. I was the NACD National Director of Public Company Director of the Year last year. He wrote me a note. So we've got this going. And all of a sudden, there's something that my company wants to do with his company. I was on the phone with him, and we spoke for 40 minutes before we start talking about business. We talked about family. We did some talk about faith. We talked about the status of things going on in the world. And then I said, hey, by the way, I was very transparent. Hey, my local office understands there's some things that you have going on that they prepared me a 3-page memo here. I certainly read it. I'm not going to go through that, but I want you to know, because he and I have a relationship, he was very straight. He said, Herman, that's great. We do X, Y, Z. And I said, well, let me tell you, everybody does X, Y, Z. And let me tell you why some people do A, B, C. He said, that's interesting. And I said, well, look, I'm going to be in the city at some point. Would love. He said, I tell you what, why don't you write me a note and you tell me about this service and that service, and I'm going to send it to my people, and I'm going to arrange for you to have a meeting with them. That is a relationship.
Yeah.
Use it in such a way that it's not just selfish for me. I always tell people, you need to bear gifts when you see people. It's not just about me. What can I get? What gifts are you bearing? And that's it. Now let me go to those 6 characteristics I talked about. Okay. So the first one, interpersonal skills. And that's really the ability to relate to people. And how do we get very good at our interpersonal skills? We become curious. We become lifelong learners. We have the ability to go in a room and we can talk to the cook and the wait staff, and we can talk to the CEO. We can talk to the private. We can talk to the general. And that means you are well informed. You have an emotional intelligence that you know who to talk to, what to say. You're not going to go and talk to the cook about, hey, what do you think about the S&P 500 today? And how did that do? And what about these trade policies? I'm not saying that they don't know these things.
Yeah.
However, that would not be, I think, the appropriate thing to do. How's your family? What are you doing? What do you like to do? The CEO, it's different. You're going to talk about things that personal, but also perhaps things that are going on in the world. So the continuous learner and the ability to relate to people, those are interpersonal skills. Very, very important. The second one are your communication skills. They are so important. And the obvious ones, speaking. And I know sometimes I've had this happen. I remember many years ago, I was talking to an assistant that was arranging for me to meet their boss. And on the phone, perhaps, I don't know how I sounded, but I walked into the meeting. The lady looks up. She said, oh, I didn't know you were, what she wanted to say, I didn't know you were Black. And I said, and you have to diffuse those situations. I said, you didn't know I was so tall and dark? She laughed. There's no need to put people on. So your speaking ability is very, very important. That's a form of communication. The next thing is your writing ability. And for your younger listeners out there, I know we do LOL and LMA, all this good stuff, but learning how to write is very important because that's going to be there with you after. Okay. People 4 levels above you may not see you, but they're going to see something you write and make sure you do that. The next one is body language. It's so important. I remember a board I was on at the CEO, bless his heart. He would just, say something that was constructive challenge to the organization. And it was just all on his face. And I knew the person reasonably well. We actually played football together in college. And I pulled him aside. I said, hey, you can't do that. You're signaling how you feel with your body language. And certainly it's okay to be whimsical or whatever. But when you grimace and this and that, you're communicating. And last but not least, Alex, your listening skills. And this is something I learned from my mom. She used to say, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth. Think about using them in that proportion. Because we always want to get out and get that next thing. And I want to interject one other thing here that your listeners may appreciate. Try to take the word but out of your vocabulary. If you're ever in a meeting and you watch or you're the question, and I say, I agree with Alex, but Alex, as soon as I say but, you know what you do? You turn off. You're going, what's he going to say? You're not listening. You're processing in the background. Your CPU is. And one of the things, if you can take but out of your vocabulary, just use the word and. I agree with Alex, which is somewhat disingenuous when you use the word but afterwards. And just say, I agree with Alex, and I would like to share another perspective on that as well. And if you can, and I'm 98% good at keeping the word but out of my vocabulary. But if I say it, I correct myself right away. So that's another for you listeners. So we got communication skills. Next, what we talk about are your analytical skills. These are critical from starting to finish. And those analytical skills is your ability both on a quantitative basis to look at the spreadsheet, to look at the balance sheet, to look at the income statement sheet and bring a conclusion. However, more importantly, the higher we get in an organization are our qualitative analytical skills. That's about which person am I going to hire in this position? Okay. Which town are we going to visit first? I mean, there's some numbers that may be involved in it, but it's really a qualitative decision making. You look like you had a question.
You mentioned something that I want to ask a question about. Okay. So two things. One, I love that list. It's amazing. And you talk about public speaking.
And we've got 3 more, by the way.
Oh, so I'll make this very brief. So when you talk about public speaking, it reminded me of a time when I was younger in my career, and we invited at the time the assistant secretary to come in and speak to. We saw her walking around the cafeteria, like, hey, why don't you come and speak to these youth? And she walked in with no prep, and she just blew everyone away. And I asked my boss, and I was like, hey, how does she do that? He's like, she's a political appointee. Like, most of them, they know how to speak. And at that point, I was like, I want to be able to do that. I want to have the skills to be able to walk into any room at any time and sound competent and be able to host a discussion. And like you said, it's having those different levels as well as being informed of what's going on in the world so you can pull from those different topics when you're in those situations. So that was awesome. This past weekend, I was going on a walk with my wife, and I was telling her, I kind of started smiling. And I was like, there was this person who I hired, this last company, who I'm no longer there, but she is so integral to that operation now. And I feel so proud that I hired that person. And I realized the reason why I was able to hire her was because the person or a few people before that I hired incorrectly. It was not a good fit for the company. And when I kind of reflected on it, I was like, oh, shoot, I hired someone who's way too much like me. I'm the visionary. I'm the big picture guy. I'm the strategy guy. And I hired someone just like me, and they didn't want to do any work. They wanted to do the big picture strategy thing. And so I wanted to ask you, how do you go about, have you ever had a bad hire? Have you ever had a great hire? And what was the difference? Like, how did you determine which was a great, which was like, man, I messed up on that one?
Yeah, well, that comes down to the qualitative versus the quantitative, right? And some things talk about kind of the gut feel. However, sometimes we have to be very careful with the gut feel, because when we do that, we do what you do. Sometimes we hire in our own image. Okay. And that's and remember, we talked earlier, the box you don't know that you don't know. And that's where, Alex, you've got to question yourself and say, am I excited about this for me? Because I'm a big guy. I look at athletes, and I will take an athlete sometime over somebody that may have been Dean's List all 4 years. Okay. And the athlete, the reason I do that, I know what I did playing college football and what it was like to go to class, go to practice. I knew what it was to do those gas drills, and it's
Mm,
really the end of it. And you're saying the fourth quarter's hours, so to speak. And
yeah.
those people, generally speaking, they have the intestinal fortitude that they're going to respond to the challenge and get it done. Veterans, people in the Army, they've been accustomed to being stretched and being hollered at
Yeah.
and not
Yeah.
having their feelings hurt and understanding it's about the mission and it's about the whole thing. So those are just some of the qualities that you look for. And again, when we try to hire at our own image,
Mm,
sometimes, I didn't say all the time, sometimes
yeah.
that doesn't work very well.
I
So the
love it.
box that you don't know that you don't know, and test yourself. And when my wife was living, obviously you didn't talk about things that you shouldn't talk about. However, as you know, you're married, you talk to your wife about things. And I would have her, she was just such down to earth. I would have her kind of challenge me on,
Yeah.
I'm thinking about this and what do you think? And she just very practical because it's good. And that's why, and hopefully later we're going to talk about boards. It's so as a board or director, you go into the organization and you're not there every day. When you're there every day, there are things that happen that you don't really see because the belt was running all the time and you all of a sudden didn't notice that the belt had missed a screw. But I
Yeah.
come in and I can see that the screw is missing because
Yeah.
you're just accustomed to seeing the belt moving. So that is so important.
So I know you have three more to get through, but really quickly, I do want to talk about that board piece. What makes you an effective board member, and also how do you work effectively with board members?
Well, the other three characteristics will help answer that question.
Awesome.
So we talked about interpersonal skills. We talked about analytical skills, quantitative and qualitative. And we talked about communication skills. And the next one we want to talk about is, in the name of your company, leadership. Leadership is critical. Leadership is the ability to influence a group to accomplish a common goal. Sometimes you lead from the back, sometimes you lead from the middle, sometimes you lead from the front. But what it is about your ability to influence and motivate others to want to accomplish a common goal. It means you got to have a vision, then you have to have the communication skills, the ability to communicate that vision. Critical. This is the next one. It seems like you've enveloped some of it, and we haven't talked about the fact that I've actually started 3 companies as well, and that's entrepreneurship. Okay, entrepreneurship or risk taking. Okay, that ability to see not what is, but to see what can be. And some people are risk averse. I'm very entrepreneurial, and not that I'm necessarily risk preferring, but I understand how to identify risk. And then the key to being a good entrepreneur is saying, how do I mitigate those risks?
Mhm.
So that entrepreneurship,
Mhm.
take a risk. And then the last one that puts a bow around all of that is passion. Having passion for what you do. And I don't mean fake passion, I mean
Yeah.
real passion. And as you can see, for me, talking about these leadership and
Mhm.
success and awards, I mean, I get into it. So I've got passion about it. And people, and passion can't be fake passion. It's
Yeah.
got to be genuine passion. And people like to be around people with passion. So I talked about connecting, right? By definition, I am a connector, Alex. So if I meet 2 people, the person I was just on the phone with, CEO again, I've already got 3 notes here when I get off the phone with you. I'm going to introduce this person to another CEO, and they have some things that they can talk about. And
Mhm.
all of a sudden, in the pure sense of it, yeah, Herman gets credit for that. But that's not the way I'm thinking about it. I'm
Yeah.
thinking about it in that long term. I don't want to just ask this person for something. What did I
Yeah.
say earlier?
Mhm.
Bear gifts.
Their gifts.
Bear gifts. That is so important. And this comes back to the whole thing about boards. My first board. So I started. People can start with their university. I started at West Point. I started volunteering. So everyone out there, you can call your alumni association, your board, and say, "Hey, I want to be on a committee, and I'm here to volunteer to do things for this organization." And I did it for West Point, and computers had sort of just come out. And the person who was head of at the time, they call it the Finance and Budget Committee, okay, who happened to have been a Harvard Business School graduate that I had been to as well. And I also, we can tell your listeners, during my Army career, I taught at West Point. So I taught finance and economics. And this person had taught in that same department. And they needed something done. I said, oh, I can do that. I'll do a spreadsheet and get it done. So product differentiation, right? How do you differentiate yourself? And 2 or 3 years later, this individual had taken over as CEO of a company that I'm on the board of today. The company's called Comfort Systems. I've been on this board for 25 years, and I'll tell some things here in a short while. And he needed someone that had government experience, because I had started a business at JLL, as you mentioned, that worked with federal, state, and local governments, and also understood the regulatory environment in Washington, D.C. And I was his man. I was 40, let's see if I'm 69 now and 25. I was 44 years old. And that was my first public company board. When I went on the board, the stock was at 5. It went down to 3. The name of the company is Comfort Systems, USA. FIX is the signal. I think yesterday it closed at, let me see here. Instead of what it closed at yesterday, let's see what it's trading at right now. That stock right now is trading at $540 per share. Okay.
A little bit of a jump.
A little bit of a jump. In 25 years, I've been on there. There are 8 of us now. I'm the longest serving member of that board, and we've just done great things. So how do you get on a board? I think that was the essence of your question. Okay. The first thing is to give yourself some education on what is it that a board does. People like it because, to the extent in this instance, it's been very financially rewarding. It's also very career enhancing in a sense. And we all have an ego. It's, hey, I'm on a board. That's a big deal, right? However, understand a board is different than being in management. Management promulgates and executes. Boards oversee. They provide guidance. There's an old saying for board members, okay, nose in, hands off, meaning know what's going on, but you're not the individual that does it. Management does it. And many people I tell, it's easier to get on a board than it is a corporate board. However, the challenge is some nonprofit boards don't exactly execute corporate governance in its best form, because small groups, staff, board members have to get in and actually help write the budget and these types of things. In a corporation, you will never do that. Your job is the board's job, primary 2 jobs. Select the CEO, because everything we've been talking about today has been talking about leadership and how important that is. And the second thing they do is approve. And notice I say approve the strategy. Those are the 2 major goals, because the strategy is all about what? Priorities and resource allocation. And if we've got the right strategy, then your job then as a board member is to say, what are the guardrails? And let me tell you the most important thing, Alex, about being a board member. You're not there to answer questions. You don't have to answer any questions. But let me tell you what a good board member does. They see around corners. They see the big picture. And their job is to what? Ask questions. A good board member, you know how to ask questions. Not only what questions to ask, but how do you ask the question? You know that something's wrong. Do you say, hey, on page 46, blah, blah, blah. Why is that? No, you don't do it that way. You do it in a collaborative manner to indicate, hey, I noted that, first of all, if it's just something like that, you would go to the C-suite person. If it's a mistake on the financials, you go to the CFO and tell them, hey, I noticed this. Why do you want to embarrass them in front of the whole group?
Yeah.
Then those bigger questions, and it's not like if I think that we ought to be expanding in Chattanooga, I'm not going to say, hey, we ought to go to Chattanooga, and this is why. You do that the different way. You say, hey, have you ever thought about Chattanooga, and what are the characteristics of Chattanooga that have caused you either to think about it or not think about it? See the
Yeah.
difference?
Yeah.
Get
Yeah.
to the same outcome, asking the question in the manner in which you ask the question. And for your listeners that are interested in boards, board work is a contact game. And what I mean by that, generally speaking, to get on a board, you almost got to know somebody on a board. Now, what has happened since George Floyd, if you look at the statistics, I'm in an organization I want to give a plug for called the Executive Leadership Council. And I hope many of your visitors, listeners are aware of it. It's an organization that supports African American leaders in the business environment. So elcinfo.com if your listeners want to look at it. Great organization. And one of the things that we do is we look out for the next generation, making sure that we bring people into the corporate sector. We provide training and assets to help people that are in get up the ladder. We provide training for C-suite people that are already in. How do you get to the C-suite? How do you become a CEO? And we've got a big focus on trying to help people get on corporate boards. And we've probably increased by probably tenfold since the George Floyd, because companies were, the conscience of the nation. And we prepare training for our members to have these conversations like you and I are having right now. Herman, what's it like to be on a board? How do you go? You don't go to the first meeting and sit wherever you want to sit, because there's a culture and there are, traditions, and you got to know these things of, what do I do? How do I do it? And remember, 2 ears and one mouth, accustomed to being, it's kind of like everybody at West Point in high school, they were the big man or big woman on campus, but you get there, we got 14. Okay. You're not going to be the big man or big woman on campus. So how is it that you sit back, observe, right? And make sure that the comments that you do make, because we all think that we've got to go in and hit a home run. And usually I do a good job, I think, of mentoring people that are coming on the boards or going on the boards. And they think, oh my gosh, I got to show that I'm the best. No, you don't. You can get in the Hall of Fame in baseball batting 225. You don't have to bat 1,000. So don't feel like you got to get up and hit a grand slam. I got to show, because if you're selected in the selection process, it's going to really go on more of those 6 characteristics that I talked about.
Yeah.
You're able to demonstrate those. If you're selected, you belong there. And don't worry about trying to make sure the first day I've got to show that I belong.
Herman, you have been so gracious with your time. And we're going to just honestly have you back, because we need to talk about your entrepreneurship and so on and so forth. We're going to have to have you back. I'd love if you would come back. Is there anything you want to share with the audience as we begin to wrap up?
Well, I think particularly, and I'm certain your audience is very, very diverse, but as we look at what we're facing from a geopolitical perspective today, and to your question earlier about how is it that when you see something that looks so bad and seems hopeless, what do we do? And I would just say, keep the eye on the prize. Everything that goes on in the world, and particularly in our nation, it's a pendulum. Things change over time. And what we want to do is we want to be around for the fourth quarter. Okay. So being a hero, getting your head up, and, in the military, we want to go after the leader. We want to knock the leader out, because we like the leader out. There's going to be dysfunction. Okay. Your listeners are leaders. And what I want them to do is I want them to be around for the fourth quarter. So how is it that we make sure we're around for the fourth quarter? First of all, have a vision of what you see for yourself and your community for the future. Then, this is more important, as important, in that vision, also have values in terms of your perception of right and wrong. You know that old golden rule, treat others the way you want to be treated? We must really, really, really execute that. And if we do those two things, then we think about the pendulum. And then, I think we were talking earlier, and I said, the other issue is be around for the fourth quarter, which means don't poke the bear. Now, that's hard to do when you've got to be outspoken and you've got to express your values. However, remember, you want to be around for the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
And this too shall pass.
You are such an amazing individual, kind sir. Thank you so much for being with us here today. Everyone, you know where I'm going with this. If you found, well, not if, you have taken something of value from this conversation. So please do us a favor and do your friend and your colleague and your family member a favor. Don't just look back. Reach back, bring someone else to the table. Don't keep this to yourself and say, oh, that person would have benefited. They should have been here. All those things are just excuses. It's very easy for you to click this like button, click this share button, and share this message with someone else who's going to definitely impact their lives. As you know, every time we end this, I just really do want everyone to know, especially in these difficult times, remember to always stay strong, stay positive, and definitely stay moving. See you. Thanks for listening to The Executive Appeal with Alex Tremble. I invite you to follow The Executive Appeal wherever you listen to podcasts. Follow me, your host, Alex Tremble, across all socials or via email for exclusive webinars, courses, and speaking engagements on continued topics of executive leadership. So until next time, stay strong, stay positive, and definitely stay moving.